In our main topic here today on Mastering Dungeons, we are looking at the best of. And this time we are looking at the best of Waterdeep Dragon Heist, the 5e hardcover adventure. Famed explorer Volo Gedarm needs you to complete a simple quest. Thus begins a mad romp through the wards of Waterdeep as you uncover a villainous plot involving some of the city's most influential figures. A grand urban caper awaits you. Pit your skill and bravado against villains, the likes of which you have never faced before, and let the dragon hunt begin. There we go. So, as our typical disclaimer here, we are looking at the best of adventures. We understand that taken as a whole, any of these adventures that we talk about might not be perfect. And in fact, we might not even like some of them that we talk about. But what we're taking is the best out of them and looking at what we think is great design and how we can take that design or those design lessons and move them forward into our own adventures.
Yeah.
So,
and with spoilers, this one in particular, like this is an adventure where you're often looking for clues and following threads. And so this will absolutely spoil it. You don't want to listen to it until you've played it or if you're going to play it. So, yeah.
Yeah. But it's also an interesting one in the sense that it is an amalgam of pieces that can be moved around by game masters. So you playing it might have a very different experience than a different person playing it with a different dungeon master if they choose to highlight or exemplify certain villains within the adventure.
Yeah, very true. Very true. And so someone could give you some zigs to go with those zags. But the heart of it is a sort of a thing. While it can play differently, the story is the story, and figuring out the story is a big part of it, which is interesting.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about a brief history of Waterdeep Dragon Heist. It was announced at the Stream of Many Eyes event in June of 2018.
And I want to pause you right there because this was like one of the peaks, right? The Stream of Many Eyes was, I think that the Stream of Annihilation was almost part podcast, part video. This was all video with a set in LA, actors in costume and luminaries in costume. Vendors had booths that were meant to be the City of Waterdeep shops. You could see the foot of one of like the enormous statues that I'm holding up a mini of WizKids from, Maxi Mini. So one of the walking statues was there. They had sort of like, fights that were part of the choreographed fights that were part of the thing. And it launched a bunch of streams by other people like Rivals who just for years did Dragon Heist based, Waterdeep based adventures, kind of really keeping that energy going. And so it's so different, right? That back then the energy that came out of this event was really, really impressive. And I think everybody really understood this adventure's underpinnings as a result of that. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but
no, that's who I was going to mention that you can still see the Stream of Many Eyes if you search that and you hop on the Wayback Machine and you get taken to a page where you can see this stream. And it included, folks like Anna Prosser and Matt Mercer and other podcasts / streams were running. Deborah Ann Wall was there running it. Mike Merles ran like an all tank game that included Joe Manganiello and some of the
like wrestling people.
I don't know if any of the wrestling folks were there. But yeah. I mean, it was a big deal, and it took place at a stage in LA. And so they really did up the production value there, which they would repeat then for future releases, which we'll talk about in a future episode. So it was released, this adventure, Waterdeep Dragon Heist, published in September of 2018. Designed for characters starting at level 1. By the end of the story, the characters would be at least level 5. This makes it one of the shortest level ranges in all of 5e adventures, but with still a ton of content, which is interesting. It is the first of a 2-part series that introduced a path into the second hardcover, which is Waterdeep Dungeon of the Mad Mage, which we will probably talk about at some point in a future episode. The second book starts at level 5 and could conceivably take you all the way up to 20th level. Despite on how the internet talks about, we want high-level adventures, we saw far less energy around the higher-level book. Beadle and Grimm's, as they often do, did a platinum edition of Dragon Heist that came in a wooden box that hold all of the great custom stuff that is typically in a B&G offering.
Yeah, and I was going to check whether... Was this the first one they did? Yes. So fun kind of trivia. They made a mock-up using Cloud Giant's Bargain, which I have tried desperately to get from them, but they're like, no, we're not giving you that. We're not selling you that. But their first one was the Platinum Waterdeep Dragon Heist. So this was the beginning of Beadle of Grimm's, which, we just talked in the main segment, in the news segment, about whale Kickstarters, right? And this is sort of baking that in to say, well, you can buy, your hardcover book, but you want to really have the deluxe experience. Here we are, a licensed partner that has this amazingly well done version of the adventure, and we break it up and we give it to you in a wooden box and all these neat, handouts that feel like real parchment and all of that. And so that was also an interesting development that we saw come out of this. Like, this is the birth of that, right?
Yeah. And I think right around this time, not necessarily with this release, but this is when we started to get a hint that D&D was growing despite all past outcomes. Where before we would start to see declines in the sales of players' handbooks, here is when we started to see the uptick. Yeah. This is when Critical Role was at one of its heights, I would say, or at least the heights of it as a podcast/stream. This is when it became economically viable for third parties to start creating D&D content. And that's why we see the Ghostfire Gamings and the Cobalt Presses and all of those begin to focus on their own, not games, but their own versions of their settings coming into the fore here.
Yeah, and there was a dice set that accompanied this, the Waterdeep Dragon Heist dice. One of the greatest things it has in it is it has a really neat wheel that has 2 digits that you can turn, so you can use it to track hit points or use it as a countdown tracker in the game. I use that thing all the time. It lives in my dice bag, and just for that alone, I think that dice set is fantastic. But it was the first of several dice sets to come out, and so we also see Wizards sort of looking at things like, okay, we can offer a lot more partnerships with other companies, doohickeys that you will buy to go with it. There was a map book that accompanied the Mad Mage release. I think that was the first map book, if I recall correctly. And so, some interesting developments like that.
The lead designer on this book was Christopher Perkins. Other designers included James Hake, James Introcaso, Adam Lee, and Matt Cernit.
Brilliant.
Yep, amazing team. And the story consultants were Matthew Mercer, perhaps you've heard of him, and also Charlie Charles Sanders. Charlie Sanders is a Hollywood writer who was writing for Key and Peele at the time and is a lifelong D&D player. And according to an interview with Chris Perkins, Sanders helped build the framework of the adventure and might even be responsible for the Goldfish Siglar, while Matt helped fill in the details once this framework had been established. Yeah. Any other thing you want to talk about in terms of the history of the adventure tales?
Yeah, none of these folks are none of these staff that we mentioned are there anymore, which is interesting. Although James now is,
I was going to say,
full time. But James is at MCDM, though he worked on several other releases with the company. Adam Lee and Matt are no longer at the company. And a lot of that is just the passage of time, right? Just those things happen and people
12
change.
years ago.
Yeah, 12 years ago. One of the other things that happened is
sorry. I am not losing my mind. It was 8 years ago.
Oh, good.
Yes, 8 years ago, not 12 years ago. So, okay, carry on.
I will say 10 years ago was the first time you and I worked on the D&D Open, which was brought back with a sort of Storm King's Thunder, very minor touch point of add a bunch of giants, but it was based in the city of Waterdeep and involved Undermountain, which is sort of fun. So that came out, the year before this adventure came out, and then or 2 years, and then it forget how the thing worked, but that first D&D Open was the bringing back of a big format and sort of began some experimenting there by the company in terms of timing. And just, there's a lot here. If you look at partner offings, the Whiz Kids, statues, things like that, there was a lot that was going on. Of course, an AL season to accompany this. There was an entire Undermountain Neverwinter MMO sequence, a very big part of that. A lot of playtime to do that tried to recreate the Yawning Portal in full detail. You can actually, if you're curious what that looks like, you can see videos on my channel where I go through and capture what the game is, just because someday that game will disappear. And it's really fun to be able to walk around in a 3D rendered Yawning Portal and meet various NPCs, talk to Durnan, go down into all these different areas of Undermountain as found in this book. It's a really kind of neat thing to see visually. I think it's even great for DMs to see. But all those expressions, right, are just way beyond what D&D had ever had in its history before.
We did do a Dragon Heist themed D&D Open that year at Origins, I think, with lots of heists going on. I worked on that with Will Doyle and James Introcaso.
Yeah, and that was the third D&D Open that happened. Yeah, it was great.
After the reboot, yep. All right, so let's take a look at the best of this adventure. We'll start with the premise and the approach. All right, folks, you say you don't want a linear adventure. Well, everyone has a different definition or what they actually mean by linear adventure. But this adventure shows us one definition of a non-linear adventure. So we've gone through 5e adventures that provided various settings and different experiences. We have jungle exploration. We have the Underdark. This one now goes into the urban adventure territory with a side of political intrigue, primarily intrigue between the factions.
I don't know how well they deliberately planned this. Probably not. They just said, what haven't we covered? And let's do urban. But, those facets that they bring into this experience really is neat, right? You want an addition to sort of teach you how to do things, show you examples of how to do things. And we get that really deep urban experience here that's just fantastic. It's like the last two adventures. I think Chris Perkins, as story architect, goes with a bit of what feels convoluted. It's hard to explain, but it works, and in play it works pretty well. I did play through this adventure. I was not a DM, I was a player. At the highest level, what's going on is Lord Daggelt Neverember, who goes on to the city of Neverwinter. He was an open lord of Waterdeep, and he gets ousted partway through the Tyranny of Dragons adventure. Well, he had hidden a bunch of coins away. And various people have heard of this. So the PCs get pulled into this search for gold coins in Waterdeep. And in Waterdeep, those gold coins are called dragons. So that's the dragon heist, is like saying gold coin heist. It's not truly a heist. This is something that people kind of talked about a lot and laughed about, that it's not really a heist, more of a search. But you end up with a lot of interesting factions and urban intrigue around where these dragons are that Lord Daggelt Neverember hid. And the groups that will hear about this, the DM will choose one of 4 NPCs to be the main opposition if they wish to.
So that we get a 24 or 25 page visitor's guide to the city written by or in the voice of Volo, a renowned explorer, writer, and liar. As an urban adventure, it focuses on the city itself or Undercity and the factions that have power there. So we get battles in sewers and in warehouses. We get to travel across the different neighborhoods, which in Waterdeep are called wards. We get to deal with the city watch and the legal code, or as it's called there, the code legal, which is another fascinating part of this adventure. You can't just go around murdering people, and you in this adventure are not the most powerful thing in your environment, which we see a lot of in some of the other adventures as you are traveling through the Underdark, as you are traveling through the jungles of Chult. Mm-hmm. You're facing things that there are no consequences if you kill.
Yeah.
Here, there are consequences, both legal and social, if you do the wrong thing.
Yeah.
You top out at 5th level, and the enemies that you're fighting are much, much, much more powerful than that. Yeah. Which means we face off against gangs and famous NPCs like Jaraxxle and Manshoon.
Yeah. Yeah, really fascinating. And there's a nice amount of deliberate work that goes into sort of trying to help the DM with this. Yep. The downtime rules that appeared in the 2014 DMG and are not in the latest version, those get use. The heroes end up having a building to own. And that's one of the kind of big through lines here, in that this is one of the few adventures that really stays focused in the area that you begin playing. You get this home, and you get to call it home from start to finish in the adventure, which is highly unusual, right? It helps that it's just through 5th level, but it becomes a focus in one of the chapters, and it can continue being a focus for many different groups that play through this. And one thing that I found fascinating is 5th edition adventures generally lacked a date. Staff at times said things that like, well, we want you to be able to play these in any order, right? Pick anything off your bookshelf and play it. Don't feel like you have to play it in a row. And yet, designers, whether staff or freelancers, couldn't help themselves from periodically giving some sort of a nod to an early adventure. So in this adventure, it has elements related to several previous adventures. You know, a woman that came from Chult, Volo has come from his tour, and it doesn't specifically say Chult, but we saw him on his book tour when we were in Tomb of Annihilation. So you know that happened earlier. And both the adventures, the guide that it provides, the Enchiriadon and Chris Perkins himself suggest a date of 1492 CR, the year of 3 ships sailing. And that's about 3 years after where probably Hoard of the Dragon Queen takes place. I've written a lot about this. It's very interesting kind of how the adventures are dated. Sometimes things that they say actually put them into a completely different order than you would expect. Like Out of the Abyss probably is the first adventure ever in the 5th edition timeline. But a lot of that may stem from the fact that they often refer, for whatever reason, to Mount Hotnow's eruption, the mountain near Neverwinter, and they get that date wrong. Staff do, repeatedly, multiple times, time and time again. They'll say, you know, it's been X years since, and that throws everything out of whack. But it's a fun read, and I think what it resulted in when people like me talked about it is they really started removing old dates from their adventures for a while, and the recent adventures tend to not have dates, which I find very interesting.
The one other thing that this adventure gives you is more organizations, more factions that you can join or interact with. So in addition to the 5 factions that we've seen all along, we now get groups like Force Grey, and we get the Brigand d'Arth, which is a mercenary group led by Jaraxxle. So there are interactions with, or possibly chances to join, these new factions or groups.
And that's a good example of that Force Grey being something that comes into this adventure based on a previous stream that Matt Mercer ran that was for the Wizards group. And just, you know, that creates an energy there that then comes into the next adventure, which is really neat. And it also comes into that idea of like Chris Perkins wanting to work with writers or cartoonists or other creatives that bring in new ideas. And so all of these things are being woven together with the heavy help of freelancers. But it's really neat.
Yep. So the introduction, then, we get an overview on how Never Ember hid 500,000 gold coins, again called dragons. But he knew that he might get caught and interrogated, so he hid his memories in an artifact known as the Stone of Galore. The Stone of Galore is like a piece of what's
Aboleth.
the creature? Aboleth. Thank you. So
Yeah,
even if Neverember
that's great.
Yeah, is caught here, his memories are here that you can maybe find. So now you get that happening over here. And the other side, two gangs, the Xanathar's Guild and the Zentarum, are about to conclude a deal when it goes wrong in ways that are related to the missing gold, because a spy who works for Neverember stole the Stone of Galore from the Xanathar, the beholder who leads the Xanathar Guild. Xanathar assumes it was the Zentarum that stole the stone. So a few people get killed, and then it turns into a bloody gang war in the streets of Waterdeep.
Yeah, there's some Gangs of New York type inspiration going on here.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
All of that mob boss type movies, things like that. And Volo has just gotten back into town after his book tour in Cholt. He decides to go on a night of, carousing with friends. And after a fun evening, his friend Floon Blagmar disappears. Because unbeknownst to Volo, Floon, after he left Volo's side, hung out with Lord Neverember's estranged son, Rainer Neverember. And the Zents grab them both. It ends up being that then the Xanathar's Guild grabs the wrong kid. Volo just knows his friend's missing and wants you to find them, which sets you onto a path that will intersect with all of these. But that's not all we have, is it, Shawn?
Oh, no, that's just the beginning. Because as you are the game master for this adventure, you have a decision to make. This is not a linear adventure. This is an adventure that you can tailor a bit. Not only can you tailor it a bit, you need to tailor it a bit. Mm-hmm. So you get to choose from 4 possible villains who will be the main antagonist for the adventurers. All of these folks are trying to get this gold dragon hoard, but the characters are going to be the ones that stand in their way. Yeah. So you get to either make the main villain Xanathar the Beholder and the Xanathar Guild. Mm-hmm. What does Xanathar want? He wants to destroy the Zents and get the stone back to get the money.
Yep.
You have the Castellanter family, a wealthy family that has made deals with Asmodeus and needs the 500,000 in gold coins to buy back the souls of their children. That might.
We all have parenting regrets.
Yes, we do. Who hasn't sold the future of their children for money? Wait, all of us.
All of us.
Who else do we have here? Yeah, who else have we got to choose from?
Jarlaxle Benray, who is secretly the Lord of Luskan. And Jarlaxle is looking to buy his way into the Lord's Alliance to elevate himself and his city. Manshoon, the often cloned former and kind of current leader of the Zentarum, who thinks that money could let him bribe the masked lords into becoming the next open lord of Waterdeep to cement power. And so each of these villains has a season. One of the cool things about that is we get information on what each season is like in Waterdeep, which is a really nice touch, right? Something you don't often see in books. And with the season comes the idea of how you can use these villains, where we might want to just insert them into play or make them sort of an end villain, depending on how it looks. Now, we're not going to kill the Xanathar, right, because of our level, but we could go up against them and their place of residence, their hideout kind of thing. We have a nice piece of art, which is recurring art of kids that play in the city across different seasons. I really love that touch from the art direction of sort of having these kids appear in the different seasons and show you what the character of the city is like. That's some really nice ideas, as well as fun ways to tie the characters to the city, information on the factions.
Yeah, and it gives you ways to either track experience points to make sure that the characters are keeping up with the level they need to be to tackle the next challenges, or just use, the typical level at the end of this chapter that we switch over to over several years of 5th edition. We also get an amazing cartoon drawing of the Yawning Portal with famous Forgotten Realms inhabitants, including Matt Mercer.
It's pretty funny.
Matt Mercer is now an official resident of Waterdeep and a canon D&D character.
Yeah, and one of the things that, what do you say? Sorry. Yeah, well, so one thing that's funny is this adventure, as you said, is not linear. But I can't help but, and I wrote a blog entry about this, look at the flowchart that we're given. And there's some other flowcharts that are like this too. A completely linear looking flowchart when it's not. But it's somehow a non-capture of it. And I think that's one of the things that actually the adventure at times almost pretends it's linear, but it really is very open. There are a lot of situations where you have 3 clues. You might get one of them, might get 2 of them, and you might have decisions or go in a certain way. And as DM, you're not exactly sure which way they'll go. But it tries, I think, it does a good job of supporting you in that. And so it's interesting how ostensibly it's linear. And maybe it's one of the strengths of this adventure that it can almost feel linear because you have these expectations. But the truth is there are a lot of decision points, and it'll probably feel pretty free and open to the characters. The players will probably feel like they're making choices.
Yeah, as we talk about the rest of this adventure, it goes, chapter 1, level 1, chapter 2, level 2, pretty consistently. But once you get to the end, you need to know which villain you are going to highlight, or villains if you choose multiple ones, because some of the things that they do or plan or say, or that some of the encounters that are implied by their actions need to happen earlier in the adventure. So if you get through all the way through chapter 4 and then you're like, okay, now let's go into the lair of one of the villains, you may find out that, oh, I should have been seeding some of these things along, or I should have had some of these encounters already. So you need to read ahead in order to be able to properly get the players ready to give them the peak experience of going after one of the villains in their own layers.
Yeah, absolutely true. All right, so chapter 1, how things kick off is Volo is in the famous Yawning Portal, and so are you. So nice, fun, drop you right into one of the key areas of this city. We have a brawl between Zents and the Xanathar's Guild as a sort of scene appetizer where you get a little feel for this. Something's not right in the city. Something's going on. You might get involved and choose one side or the other to help. Or maybe you just witness what happens. And you probably make some NPC connections, which is kind of a nice way to get people, again, get the players and their characters tied into NPCs and factions, or at least exposed to them. And just in case things aren't lively enough with that fist fight, we get a wounded troll covered in sturges crawling up the well, Shawn.
Yeah, and I love the design here because you can go a lot of ways as the player with this. Okay, you see these 2 different factions start to fight each other. One is like this one big hulking brutish NPC. The other is a bunch of them, and you can tell that the NPC, the one single NPC is beat up pretty well, the one, but there's others coming. And sometimes the players are just going to sit back and watch. And whoever designed this knew that. So they're like, okay, if everyone's just sitting around and doing nothing, I need something to actually spur the players forward here. So let's have the troll climb out of the well from Undermountain and get into it. Now, these characters are first level, and the troll's pretty tough. So let's have Durnan, owner of the Yawning Portal, handle the troll, because Durnan is an experienced adventurer. But the Sturges do offer a threat, so he's yelling at the characters to take care of the Sturges.
And it's a fun idea that the troll didn't supermine the Sturges because it's just been regenerating. So it's a little bit down on its hit points, but not much. And now the Sturges come out saying, oh, this is, interesting. Let's feast on all these other people. And it gives you a little touch. It's sort of fun that, we know we're going to go to possibly, we have the option of ending this adventure and going to Dungeon of the Mad Mage. So starting with the well is actually really brilliant too, right?
Yeah. So Volo is witnessing this whole thing and sees that the characters hopefully have acquitted themselves well during the fight. And he decides to hire them to find Floon, who vanished 2 nights ago after Volo parted ways with his friend at the Skewered Dragon Inn in the Dock Ward.
Yeah. And this is a really nice piece of design because we get a what happened that night for the DM. And this happens in several parts in this adventure where it kind of gives you the traditional text that, you're going to use to sort of give some hints to the players. But a lot of times they can't learn everything now. So then it goes and it gives you a specific section saying, and here's what actually happened, right? So that you know everything and understand what's going on, even though not all of the clues reveal this yet. I like that. It's really nice design here. The two Jameses just really nail this on how they write these pieces. So Volo doesn't know that Floon, after parting with him, ended up hanging out with Raynor Neverember. The two were attacked by the Zentarum, taken to a warehouse. Then the Zents were attacked by the Xanathar's Guild, because again, this whole, gang warfare thing going on. The Xanathar's Guild grabs Floon, thinking he's Raynor. Raynor is hiding in the warehouse, afraid to come out. So the players now have to stumble into this.
And remember, back in the day, these factions were something that you could join. So you could have a party full of Zentarum characters. Now, the Zentarum in this adventure turn out to sometimes be the bad guys, depending on if they are part of Manshoon's plans or if they are a different section of the Zentarum. So it was good that the Zentarum were the ones that started it, but the Xanathar's Guild are the ones that end up taking a Floon away. So you don't have either a compunction against attacking the Xanathar's Guild like you might the Zentarum, and you can't just walk in and say, hey, I'm Zentarum, so hand them over.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and there's some nice moments. There are these Kenku that are in the Zent hideout. That was a real tough fight. And I should say, I play tested this when I played it, and one of the folks in my group ran it. So there are always chances that a little bit of my memory is colored by a pre-final version of this adventure. I'm not deliberately trying to reveal anything about that because that's my NDA, as old as it might be. But there's always some chances that I misremember it a little bit. So you find Raynor, you might meet the Watch, which is fun. Then you go into the sewers to figure out what happened to Floon, which is really great city stuff. Where we've got, a night on the town and the tavern. We've got Undermountain color. We've got going into the city streets and dealing with gangs and warehouses, and now into the sewers. It's just perfect city stuff. There are some fun moments like Nielur, the Mind Flayer, and his pet Intellect Devourer, which he leaves for you to fight while he escapes. And even getting out of the sewers is interesting. Like, you can end up in a couple of different cellars, shocking the people there and creating maybe lasting interactions with those folks. So eventually you rescue Raynor, find Floon, you get back to Volo, and Volo doesn't quite have the money to pay you. So what happened, Shawn?
He says, well, you know what's even better than money? Real estate. Real estate, the value is always increasing. Always. And I happen to have the deed to this place in Trollskull Alley in the city called Trollskull Manor. So chapter 2 is, hey, here's your new home. Go check it out. So at second level, you get to go through this really neat section, which creates a relationship between the characters in the city. And this was something that, I loved, many people loved, and helped focus downtime activities in people's minds, and helped us, come up with stuff for Acquisitions Incorporated as a concept.
Yeah. And I know when I played through this, we did a lot of downtime activities in this chapter. And it's a fairly open chapter in that you don't yet know all these troubles that are going on. You don't understand the intersection of the path that you're on and all of the city's troubles. You're just kind of thinking you finished your quest. And so you can focus on the tavern for a bit. One of the things you focus on is the spirit of a previous tavern keep is there, Lif. And Lif the poltergeist, you might destroy them, or they might become your friendly neighborhood ghost and help, sweep at night and things like that, which is sort of funny. We get a map of the alley and various shops with possible hooks to play with. So there's a disguised Rakshasa detective. There is a competitor who tried to buy the deed and lost it out to Volo, and will, over the course of the adventure, try to hire people to damage your reputation and fill it with rats and any number of other things. It's just some really neat places that you can use. You can run downtime activities to fix your tavern, use the downtime to run it and see how it goes. And part of this is another really great purposeful design here around how the city interacts with your place of business, because there is bureaucracy. And so there are guilds you've got to deal with. You can't just buy wine. You've got to get it through the Vintners Guild and all these kinds of things. And so there are guilds for the food and the repairs and all these things. And you're supposed to go and work through all of them and negotiate with them. And it's fun. It's neat. And these things can also be contacts that you have. The NPCs are done up in very interesting ways. So it's not just like a rigmarole you're going through. Even if it feels that way bureaucratically, it also creates ties to the city. And then even the factions will come in, right? And they give you various missions and jobs, and you can climb and level with them.
Yep. So as you do all of this stuff, you are earning experience and earning money and earning connections. And you finally get to level 3. And level 3, after this sort of fun role-playing bureaucracy sort of experience, starts off with a literal bang as a fireball goes off just outside your tavern. When you go to investigate, you can interact with the watch, you can interact with witnesses, and you realize that the dead here include a gnome and several Zentarum. One of the Zents has survived and taken the stone and was seen on the rooftop. Seen on the rooftop was a Nimblewright, which used a necklace of fireballs, which it also dropped and the PCs might find. So the gnome that you find was the one that stole the Stone of Galore from Xanathar, creating all this trouble. And the Nimblewright was sent to snatch it away. The Zents that are there were hired by a noble family called the Growlhunds, who also sent the Nimblewright. So there's the crime scene investigation portion of our show, which includes chasing the Nimblewright, who ends up at the Temple of Gond. So that's a path that you will probably end up taking.
Yeah, that's the most likely path, and it's definitely what we did when we played. But also a possibility is if for some reason you don't catch that bit about the Nimblewright, you might know that it's Zentarum, and you might follow the reputation of the one that got away, leading to the family that hired them. Because there's a little bit of a convoluted piece there around this family that has its own dark secrets. Not the Castellanters we talked about earlier that can be a main foe, but this is another family that can lead to trouble.
Yeah. And one of the things that's important to note is we said at the start of this is only levels 1 through 5, which is the smallest range of any adventure. What you get to do then with that extra space and page count and word count is to create some diverging paths, to create more advice for the game master and how to run this. And so that's an important part of this adventure is this is going to get convoluted quickly. So let's use some of our word count to let the game master understand how these things interact with each other.
Yeah. And there's some fun things where like the equivalent of red herrings are done in ways that I think are very funny for fun for the players and funny for the DM. One of my favorites is that if you go to the Temple of Gond, you can get this Nimblewright detector that one of their Nimblewrights has, because in fact, the Nimblewright assassin you're trying to find was created by this Nimblewright, which has its own interesting kind of bit there of, I created someone in my image. But here's this detector to go chase them down. And you get to decide in what ward you're going to start looking. And you might think to do things like the dock ward. Well, that'll lead you to a ship that has a bunch of Nimblewrights, but they're just there at having been purchased by the owner. And they might say, well, go see the boss. And you go out to this ship and you find Zardoz Zord, who is actually a disguised Jarlaxle. And the art clearly shows that this is a strong joke regarding acting Sean Connery's fascinating outfit of like sort of red bandolier in the movie Zardoz. And then another joke is that Jarlaxle has a ship called the Scarlet Marpenoth, which is Marpenoth is the month of October, so in Faerun. So this is
Red October.
The Hunt for Red October with Sean Connery. And there are a bunch of other things like this in there. Good thing, Sean, that you and I never do silly things like this in our adventures.
That would be wrong, Teos. That would be wrong. So the investigation likely leads to, after a bit, Growlhund Villa. Here we get the classic urban tropes. How do they run this investigation without tipping off the people that they are being investigated? And all the people at the villa need to do is summon the watch and say, these people are harassing us. So you have to figure out a new way other than just breaking down the door and going through.
Yeah, and what makes it interesting is this family is full of cultists. And on top of it all, this is a brutal place at a brutal time. The Zent that they made deals with are now kind of angry at how things have played out. And they've killed household staff and guards and are moving upstairs to get the family that's still up there. And so you get, depending on sort of how you handle things, you're going to talk to either Zents or the family members and learn various bits. What will happen, though, is the Nimblewright will escape with the stone just before the City Watch arrives. You get the same funny pair of watch detectives that showed up for the fireball, Barnabas Blastwind and Saith Cromley. They are a lot of fun to work with, and they're like, you guys again. And there are opportunities depending on what you do. You could spend some time in jail or with the Code Legal, or have to turn to your factions, very important, to bail you out. And there's a lot written about sort of, this person will bail you out under these conditions. But now okay, you've started to piece together some of what's going on. You know that you need this Stone of Galore. You know that there is this fortune that's been buried and all these groups are fighting each other. And you now know, all right, the Nimblewright has the stone. I've got to find the Nimblewright.
Yeah, and so now we go to chapter 4, which is, third or fourth level, where you figure out that the Nimblewright has taken the stone and delivered it to a place related to whichever villain you have chosen. So if you chose, one faction, you go to this ward, or one villain, you go to this ward, another villain, different ward. So here is where you go to the spot marked X on the map, wherever that may be, and you have a series of encounters for that villain in that season. This will reuse encounters, but place them in a different order depending on which villain you have chosen.
Yeah, and I'm going to hold up for folks who are watching this really interesting. Again, it makes it look super linear, but what it is 4 columns of seasons with encounters. But the encounters are sometimes the same, but they're in an entirely different order based on the season. Right. So, for example, if you go spring with Xanathar as the villain, we start with encounter 2, Mistshore. But if you do summer and the Castlanters, that encounter isn't used. But if you do autumn and Jarlaxle, it's the next to last encounter. And each of the encounters will use sort of the heart of it, but will have a piece that speaks to the season that sort of repositions them. Like maybe you're doing a rooftop chase, but who's being chased and what kind of exact stakes depends on the villain and the previous encounter that you face. So each season will have a slightly different take on that rooftop chase, which is sort of fun because on the internet, some people would say like, oh, I really hate chases after going through my chase scene. And someone else will say, well, I had the best time ever. But they played very different seasons and had different situations that led to the chase. And so you could have these very different interactions that was interesting to sort of have people talk about.
Yeah, and that's an important thing too, is that the seasons play a huge part, because in the summer it's going to be sweltering and it's going to be oppressive. Well, in the winter you're going to be going through snow and slush, and so how each one was designed based on the season changes is a really clever way, and it's a way that makes this replayability a possibility. As if once you get through those first 3 chapters, it becomes more divergent in play.
Yeah, which is interesting design. I don't know that I hear a ton of people replaying it. What I have heard some DMs say that I think is really true is once you've run it once, you probably have a way you really love to run it. And so if you were to run it again for another group, you would really be like, yeah, this is the season that sings to me. I get which of these encounters I really love and sort of how I want them to weave them together. And so it's one of those adventures that for sure your second run is going to be really likely to be really sweet, because you will so understand all these bits we're talking about.
So after you have gone through this encounter chain, you have the Stone of Galore, and whoever attunes to it knows that 3 keys are needed to open the door that leads to this gold dragon hoard. You also know that a gold dragon itself is protecting the treasure. So you can enter the vault, providing a dungeon experience with traps. When you reach the gold dragon, Oranax, he is shapeshifted into a dwarf. So you can try to talk him into trusting you and deciding what to do with the gold. And you could just take it and give it to the people of Waterdeep. But the villain will send some foes to stop you. And factions allied with you will also show up. So you could just end the adventure here. Or you may decide to go after a villain, whether just because you want to take them down or because they have somehow foiled you, and now you need to go deal with them.
Yeah.
And that's why you need to read ahead to figure out what happens if things have gone not according to your plan or the plans of the adventure or game master.
It's very easy that at this point, because you got the goal or you got the gold, you decide what to do with it, you've beaten up the thugs that were sent to take you on, the forces of whichever villain, it's very easy to say, I don't need to go after the villain. I got what I want. And this feels very satisfying. And I found that in our play, we were sort of like, wait, what? Now we're supposed to go after Manchun? Why? And so that's where it's important. And I think the DM sort of found, I really needed to have sort of seeded that earlier, so that maybe you actually went before the end to take them on. And when we played through, we kind of thought, that could have worked if it had been earlier, would have been a little stronger. So then it could finish on the recovery of the gold, or find a way that you get people excited about still going after that group because you feel they're going to keep coming after you or something like that.
And what's super tricky about it is these enemies, for the most part, are much, much, much stronger than you. So if you have the gold, if you've already dealt with the gold, this is a suicide mission, if you think about it.
It sounds like it,
So if you give the gold away at the end of chapter 4, you may not get people wanting to go. So you have to do some seeding, as Teos said, or some manipulation of the plot, possibly in order to have the characters go deal with these folks. Because when you deal with them in the upcoming chapters, there's often advice on, like, they will try to hire the characters to go get the gold, or they will bribe the characters to go get the gold, or they will try to do something else. And if the gold's already gone, all of that becomes moot. So you need to think about that. So at this point, you can either quit or go into Undermountain and play Dungeon of Mad Mage, or you can go face down some of the villains. And each chapter is a different villain. So you should be 5th level when you start chapter 5, 6, 7, or 8. And So these are the potential capstones for these adventures, depending on who the main villain that you chose will be.
Mm-hmm.
Chapter 5 is the Xanathar and the Xanathar's lair. We're not going to go into each of these because literally each one is a dungeon of some sort of multiple rooms. I'm talking like 36 room dungeons.
Yeah.
And in the adventures that we've covered from the old AD&D days, sometimes they're smaller than just a single layer in these adventures. But what's cool about them is it gives characters different ways to interact with each of them. There is the straightforward go through and treat it like a dungeon, but there are also ways to role play. There are also ways to explore. There are also ways to deal with the problem in a non-combat solution, because these Xanathar and Manchun and the Castellanters are all very powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So we get ways to destroy a layer, ways to interact with or disrupt their plans, the layers themselves, and then special events that will happen either in the layer or within the city if you've chosen this particular villain.
And those are a lot of fun. In fact, one of the options that can be really worth considering is, I'm not going to go against the layer, but using these various events at various points makes sense, because all of these villains, it's not like you're turning a villain on. I don't mean it that way. You're not, enabling this villain and the others are off. Like, they're all in a part of this adventure. And the question is, do you want to sort of spotlight them as this central figure, even though we know they're all going after things? And so one of the things you can do is sort of introduce these, just, pick the events that you like and make it a more complex thing with actually 4 villains. There's a lot of freedom here for a DM to sort of find the way they like to run this adventure and really make it, I think, something really special, like a keystone thing where people would, your group would say, remember that dragon heist adventure? That was awesome. Because if you can figure those pieces out, right, and how you want to make use of this, if you, on the other hand, read it linearly and suddenly get to these chapters and go, wait a minute, how do I go now to these villain layers? I thought we finished. And the players are like, I thought we finished. That's where this will serve you least well, right? And I think when that happened, then people reacted that way to it.
Yeah. So these 4 chapters would be great just to pick up and run as a separate, total different adventure you could do. But they're there, and they've got some neat stuff in them, and we're not going to go through them room by room. Yeah. That would be another 4 episodes. But
when it comes to organized play, I forget. I know that Chris Lindsay worked on an adventure where you don't really know what's happened, but you're underwater and exploring this place, and it turns out you're in Stilgar's aquarium in the Xanathar's lair. I forget the exact, but it's a really fun. Yeah. Do you remember that one? That was another great. There's so many things you can pull from too, because again, as we talked about with Tomb of Annihilation, the guild adepts are rocking at this time. Like Will Doyle's Guide to Tavern Keeping, he was the primary author on that. Really great way to flesh out what we do with Trollskull Manor. In fact, Eric Mengy and I were all set to write a book like that. The adventure comes out. Will Doyle's thing immediately drops, and we're like, well, shelving that idea because this is great. And a number of really neat things that expanded, with encounters for Waterdeep and things like that. So there is a lot out there that you can use to then enrich this experience, the entire organized play season, which dealt heavily with the Underdark and things like that. Yeah.
Chapter 9, in case you are still listening, is Volo's Waterdeep and Kyradian. I can't say that word. It's a gazetteer for Waterdeep, right? Yeah. It's a guide to the city written in Volo's voice. There are appendices with new monsters, magic items, NPCs, and handouts. The handouts include the people you befriend at the Yawning Portal, the Code Legal, the Trollskull Manor and Tavern maps, and a key to the famous people depicted in the Yawning Portal cartoon art. So overall, a really a twist, if you will, on much of the stuff that we'd seen before. Yeah. This is a non-linear adventure that can be run in a linear fashion, but it's got all of the city urban adventuring tropes and all the rules that you need for it to really steep your players in this city and have some fun adventures with them there.
We were asked in our news segment, what we're proud of. And, if I were James Hake or James Introcaso, I would absolutely see them saying something like this project, because this is a project that's really bold, really intentional design and smart design. If you ask D&D to be bold, here's a great example of it. Like, this is doing so much with an urban adventure. If you run this, you will feel a different way about how you can run urban adventures from here on out, right? It will change how and you may like or not like various parts of it, but you'll come out of it going, yeah, I really know what I like and don't like about urban adventures, and I have a lot of ideas for how to run them. It's really great design.
Yeah, this is one where you can not like it, but you can't fault the design for it.
Exactly.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
All right. So that was I almost said Volo's guide, but that's not it. That was Waterdeep Dragon Heist. So thank you all out there for listening. Thank you to those who support us via our Patreon. If you would like to become a patron, you can go to patreon.com/masteringdnd. You can support us as a Master of Dungeons supporter. We thank you for that. Our Master of Realms and our Master of the Multiverse supporters, they get the D&D content that we create, as well as a call out in our show notes for the Master of Realms supporter and live for the Masters of the Multiverse. And then I'm going to read those names. Agile Monk of Fantasy Companion Workshops, Keith Ammon of The Monsters Know What They're Doing, Lou Anders of Lazy Wolf Studios, Craig Bailey, Rudy Chainsaw Basso, David Bastiansen, Derek the Bearded GM, Steve Bissonette, Merrick Blackman, Bosch John from Duality Press, Calvin Bridges of Alos, Robo Ballin, Kevin Criswell, Dead Inertia DM, Evil John, Evan at Nimble Co., Kevin Davis, Will Doyle, Andy Edmonds at Nerdronomicon.com, James Fisher, Scott Fitzgerald Gray at Insane Angel Studios, Ted and Guyana from Frog Helmet Games, Ben Heisler and Paige Laitman, Simon the Hunter, Shawn Hurst, Hyperlexic, The Jaunty, Mantis, TTRPG Podcast, Mark and Mary's Gaming Compound, The Mighty Jerd, JR of The Twilight Perspective, JT Evans, Brian King, Jim Klingler, Gail Kurmandy, Schwill from Maine, Leftria, almost couldn't get that one out, Chad Lynch, Paul Mata, The Mathemagician, Jaron from Mathis Arcanum, Eric Mengi, Anna B. Meyer of Fantasy Cartography, Trey McLemore, Michael, John Mickey, Sean Molly, Falcon Neal, Tom Nelson of the Deck of Player Safety, DT Norris of DT and Dragons, Phil Wirt from the Philadelphia Area Gaming Expo, Philip and Lindsay, Frog Prince at Tentacles Squelching Wetly, Post Fiction RPG Audio, Ricardo Who Might Adventure, Robert Pasley, Vladimir Prenner from Croatia, Joe Russo, Ozymandias Rex, Runner Rick, David Rideout, Chance Russo at Drago Russo, Andy Shockney, Krishna Simons, Tim Smith, Spark from Dunner Games, Jeff Stevens at jeffstevensgames.com, Josh and Lee Wanika of the Tabletop Journeys podcast, Talos the Storm Lord, Jeremy Talaman from Masters of Alchemy, Trace, Ryan Schrook, Joe Tyler, Earthworm, Marcelo de Velasquez, the Valiant DM, Vidocles G, James Walton, Graham Ward, Jason Ward from Accidental Cyclops Games, Javier Waziak, Waterford Wizard, Chris Webster, Ian Wright, and Z. Walt Winfrey. Thank you so much for your support. Again, you can go to patreon.com/masteringdnd to support this production. You can also go to Apple Podcast or wherever you listen to this show and leave us a review, give us some stars, or go to YouTube, leave some comments, subscribe, and do all of that fancy stuff that you can do there. So, Teos, What have you been up to on your social medias?
There are videos, there are blogs. Go to alphastream.org, see all the latest. I am cracking so many suns that I think it may be a little bit of a dry spell. So this is a good time to catch up on things that you missed in the past while I catch up on that design and development.
You can find me on the socials at Shawn Merwin, or follow the podcast on the socials at Mastering DND. YouTube, we gotcha. YouTube.com/at Mastering Dungeons to see these beautiful countenances in real time. So, Teos, we have survived both the physical, mental, emotional, social, political, and legal parts of Waterdeep. What are we going to do now?
Well, I think the most important way to celebrate a Waterdeep campaign is for you and your party to all put your best Zardoz costume on.
I'm going to go clone myself like Manchun. I can get some real serious work done.
Yeah, that would be lovely.
Except for the maniacal part, but we're halfway there anyway.
Yeah.